Genose milwitiwak nanotoka Saray. Hope the sun greeted you all well today. My name is Saray. I am not from these lands, so it's an honor to be in such sacred lands and in respect to all the original people that have taken care of these mountains, rivers, air, you know. So my family originates from northern Mexico, and part of also like my story and my journey has been to kind of, it's connected to that. We have a long history of migration, and I feel that at such an early age, I was taught to always ask permission, acknowledge the land that I'm in, acknowledge the people that are there, because when we migrate, we ask for permission. We need each other in that process when we're moving from place to place, right? So knowing that there's these beings that we cannot see and those underneath that sometimes, you know, we need to be mindful of, I think it's always been important for me to recognize that, right? And I think that it's also connected to my work. I feel that the academia has been really interesting. This evaluation world has also been very interesting and a really interesting space to be in. And I think that my journey and my family's journey has really taught me how to move in these places, right? And making sense of it. There's a lot of terms that are used, there's a lot of process that perhaps do not go with the way that I was raised, or do not go with the way that my family, my parents have taught me to move, right? And I think that that's where Pueblo analysis is born, right? There were a lot of things about academia have made me feel really uncomfortable when even generating a space of, you're gonna work with community, you're gonna do this, and you need to ask these questions. And it's like, I don't feel comfortable, you know? Regardless of whether I look like them or not, I did not feel comfortable invading a community and coming in and saying what's wrong, you know? So I had to step away then, rather than just following those rules of, you know, telling me what to do and you need to have this report and you need to do this. I felt like, you know what? I am just gonna follow who I am and how I've been raised and see where it goes. And I think that the people that have appreciated this the most are the original communities. I felt that even as somebody that had migrated and it was new to New Mexico, what is now known as New Mexico, I was welcomed with open arms, you know, by the original nations. And it had to do with me staying true to who I am and how I move in this world and how my parents taught me to move, right? So I remember being told to do a SWOT analysis, and this is where this topic emerges. And if you think about it, for those of you that do not know what a SWOT analysis is, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Yes, so even thinking about my mother, and I was sharing, you know, with my friend Claudia, I'm like, you know, asking my mother, what are the threats of this space? She would freak out. Like, who's threatening you? Is somebody following you? So I had to find a way of, okay, and finding out a way of how would I interpret the SWOT analysis so it's not that aggressive, so that I feel comfortable using it, I connect with community, and they feel comfortable in that process, right? So the first time I ever did this was in South Mexico, in Chiapas, and I was told to use a SWOT analysis, and that's where the beginning of this happened, because in Chiapas, I ended up using barrio, which was more comfortable, a comfortable word in that area because it's neighborhood, you know, it's short for neighborhood. So we ended up using that as an acronym, right? Each of these words. And that felt good because we addressed everything that the SWOT analysis addresses and even more. They shared stories, they shared dreams, they shared commitments, right? So in my journey of migration, I went back to the place that has seen me grown since I was 5. And it so happened that there's an indigenous community there. And even though I am from, I mean, the mountains in this area recognize me, I still needed to recognize that there's been a community there that migrated many years ago before my family did, that in a way I wanted to introduce myself, right? And it sounds silly to some, but it makes sense to me because, you know, perhaps Santa Fe and Jemez is like right there and you're like, oh yeah, but it's like, no. Jemez Pueblo is, you know, it's its own, and there's a connection with Santa Fe, and we still have that responsibility to honor that and introduce ourselves to that land, because that land doesn't know us as it knows the original people of that place, right? So I felt the need to do that, and I was so fortunate that they opened the doors for me. After many shredded resumes and applications, they finally were like, yes, we need a program coordinator for this after-school program. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I had no idea what I was going to do, but Isleta del Sur Pueblo is a relative of New Mexico. They migrated. It's not my story to share, but it's important for you all to know that, yes, they are connected to New Mexico, but they ended up in the border of El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez. So going back to the Pueblo analysis, as I started working there as a program coordinator, we use this word Pueblo as a way of kind of also identifying you know, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the community and the program itself. I had been told that many coordinators had left, that nobody had stayed. So I wanted to introduce myself, and I'm like, okay, so how do I do this? How do I, rather than coming in as the program coordinator and saying, oh, what happened, you know, in the past, or I'm like, well, I want to make it engaging, right, where everybody's involved. So I ended up creating this, and each letter signifies something. So one of the first questions I asked is for me to really get to know the community and also the program that I was working with. I asked them, if you could paint a picture of your program, you know, what might that look like? How might you describe this scenery, right? Paint that picture, and that's what the P in Pueblo stands for. This is where we collect the narrative, the story, right? And each person have their own way of interpreting this painting of what they see, you know, in the program. And that's where I began to see, you know, the similarities and differences, because some described, you know, the program the same, but some of them tweaked it a little bit, and I could see who was invested a lot more, who had been there a long time, compared to asking them, oh, how long have you been here for, you know? And them describing it, you could tell, right, that they had been there for a while. So that was the first one. Then we talked about underneath. We got into, you know, deeper into that conversation and connecting to the roots of a lot of the issues, you know. I think like this can also relate to me, you know, and maybe you all, that there's some things in families that you never tell anybody. It's between you all. Nobody needs to know anybody's business, right? I mean, there's stuff that we hide underneath that nobody else could see, and when we step out of the house, everything's perfect and put together, right? I wanted them to have that conversation and to be honest with themselves, not for me, but for them. Identify what is underneath the surface that perhaps nobody else on the outside can see. Only you all, because you all are the ones working with children, right? So that's where the you in Pueblo comes in, and talking about that, talking about the origin of these problems, the beginning of the program. What were the problems there? What are the problems between you all? Let's solve that, being honest with ourselves. Then, after that, and I feel like it's also this process of emotions, right? The painting. Then we start getting deeper into underneath the surface. Okay, this is what's wrong, right? But we also need to shift and say, okay, now we see that there's issues underneath the surface. Let's think about, where does our sun rise to the east? It's always a new day. It's always a new beginning. What are the things that you all would like to see, considering that there's issues here? How can we see these new beginnings? How can we implement new ideas? What would you like to see, right? And this is where they begin to dream. Oh, well, this would be awesome. We need this new, and we need to get rid of that and this. And I'm like, okay, awesome. So this is where they begin to share. That's where the E comes in Pueblo. And the B comes right after, because in the conversation, it's also important to acknowledge that some things should stay the way that they are. There's some things that do not need to change. I mean, sometimes as when we're trying to just revamp a program, or, this is new, we got funding, let's start from scratch. No. There's always a good balance of what was, How can we describe that? What are the things that keeps that table stable? Let's keep it, because if we start from scratch, we might mess up the infrastructure and it's not going to stand as it has for many years, and acknowledging that yes, there are some good things that when that program was created should remain, should be honored, but there could be opportunities for new, and finding that balance, right? And before I move on, I also want to share with you that these images are people from there. They were super excited to be a part of it too. And this is a grandmother and a granddaughter, which they represent that balance, right? And I think in honoring that too, there's a lot of, Isleta del Sur Pueblo, just like a lot of communities have faced, this modernization, this resistance. Isleta del Sur Pueblo in particular is like resisting the city of El Paso, and then you have the Mexico border, and then, and it's like, and then Texas. So how are they, I see them as them trying to protect, what they have in a very tight spot. So thinking of that too, right? The sacrifice that this grandmother has made so that the granddaughter can have an after-school program, Let's keeping that balance, right? And the L and the O. While talking about the balance, this was also an opportunity to begin to talk about the things that we love, right? That's always going to be the drive to everything, is what feeds our spirits, what moves it, what's going to keep us going, what is it that you love about the program? Often the children, seeing that process, right, of them evolving. And then, in Pueblo would be offerings, which meant the commitment. Each of us have something to offer. What are you willing to commit to your program so that it could continue to succeed. I think that often we feel so refreshed when doing an evaluation or an analysis like, oh, here's the report, peace out, I'll see you all next week. And it's like, no, this is a commitment. What can you do? Well, I know how to knit. Okay, then you can integrate that. Would you like to give a class? You know, we need to continue feeding that fire. And it's important, right? Because I think that that's the one thing that the SWOT analysis does not do. It doesn't take into consideration love. It doesn't take into consideration voice. It doesn't take into consideration the offering, that commitment to continue. Oftentimes evaluators go, do their thing and leave, right? And I think that that's also something that I've had to learn, is knowing that the Pueblo analysis wasn't something that I planned on presenting till Audie invited me, because it's a model for, you know, for Isleta del Sur Pueblo. They should be up here talking about how they've used it and how awesome it was to co-create something. But I think that it's also important to share, because we do need the voice of our community, and we cannot make them feel uncomfortable. If you don't feel comfortable doing something, then something needs to be modified, right? And I think that we often get lost with pleasing the system rather than pleasing ourselves and saying, this doesn't feel right, I'm not gonna do it, I'm gonna do it another way, and honoring that, right? And honoring the people that you're also working with. But thank you all so much for your time. I truly appreciate it.